This is the fourth episode in our season covering homicides across the United States, and the second in a series. The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed are solely the interviewee's own. All individuals are presumed innocent until proven guilty in a court of law. This episode discusses substance use, violence, hate crimes, homophobia, transphobia, homicide, crime scenes, and autopsy. Listener discretion is advised. This series contains detailed discussion of intimate partner violence. If you're in need of support, please reach out to 800-799-SAFE or 7233 or thehotline.org. This is The Fall Line. Last time, we began the story of Armani Dante Morgan, a 27-year-old Dallas native who grew up in the Oak Cliff area, surrounded by his loving extended family. His mother, aunts, uncles, grandparents, and cousins. They'd attended the same schools, played on the same sports teams, and participated in leadership clubs and student government organizations. Armani's mother worked long hours in the healthcare field, so he spent a lot of time at his Aunt Robin's house. She cared for him alongside her own children, and he was especially close to her youngest daughter, Deshay. Education was important to Armani's family, and it's also where he first developed his love for fashion. In middle school, he took a home economics class that taught him basic sewing skills, and inspired him to learn more about clothes, and then about hairstyling. When he began to miss class after his grandfather's death, Robin attended middle school herself to make sure that he was there, but she said that eventually, his desire to fit in with other people meant that she and his mother could no longer make sure that he attended. Armani was gay, and his family loved and supported him, but Robin told us that he had a harder time with the outside world, where he sometimes faced bullying and conflict. That led to part of his search for acceptance. That and his strong desire to love and be loved. Sometimes that drew him toward people who didn't have his best interest at heart and into situations that could be dangerous. By his mid-20s, Armani had a nonviolent criminal record for theft-related charges and had some struggles with drug dependency. He'd become involved with a number of people who Robin does not consider real friends because of this. People who were willing to hurt Armani for their own gains. Robin told us that's what led Armani into one of the situations that the family feels endangered his life, that and his romantic relationship. Armani was dating a man who Robin described as involved in the local drug trade and who was unwilling to see Armani openly. This boyfriend had a live-in girlfriend and kept his relationship with Armani a secret. Over the course of their involvement, Robin said things had grown increasingly violent. Armani's boyfriend had assaulted him on a number of occasions, and Robin's daughter had taken Armani to the hospital for treatment. Armani wanted to end things, and he told his boyfriend that. That did not stop the threats or the intimate partner violence. And that wasn't the only danger Armani was facing that spring. We mentioned untrustworthy people who were willing to hurt Armani. Over the course of a few years, he'd become entangled with two people whom his aunt calls associates, a woman who was a former neighbor, and a man who was another alleged local drug dealer. The three were working together to convert SNAP benefits to cash for drug purchases. Armani's role was social. He knew lots of people, and he made connections to trade use of benefits for money. Robin stresses that these were dangerous associates that Armani could not seem to extract himself from. When the deal went south, the former neighbor claimed that Armani owed her $400, and she demanded that money. When he didn't give her that amount, the threats began, and so did the physical attacks, led by the female neighbor. Armani lived in an apartment complex in East Oak Cliff with his mother, and Robin told us that their home was the center of the attacks. There were plenty of witnesses around, but that didn't matter. No one was willing to speak up for Armani. On May 22, 2017, the former neighbor caught Armani outside his apartment. Allegedly, she was accompanied by two teenage males, and the three physically assaulted Armani and left him beaten and bruised. He was not hospitalized on that occasion, Robin said, but he was injured and very afraid. He stayed inside his mother's apartment as much as possible, avoiding any further interactions with either of his associates. But that did not stop them. They found other ways to track him down. They started with phone harassment, and it didn't end there.
So it sounds like the following week, the week of May 30th, she was starting with the phone harassment.
Yes, because she couldn't catch him anywhere. And when she went to the regular places where the two of them hung out together, and she was asking everybody that knew him and knew her, have you seen Armani? Have you seen Armani? And, nobody had seen him. So she eventually figured out, okay, well, he's at home. And that's when she started making the harassing phone calls on May the 30th. And I mean, she called that house all day. It has to be a crazy person to continue to dial a phone 24 hours in one day, constantly calling and hanging up. And when she couldn't lure him outside that day, May the 30th, she continued it the following day, May the 31st. And when the harassing phone calls were not getting what she was looking for, when all of a sudden the gun bullet pierced through the living room window, and Armani and his mom lived the second floor.
Though Dallas police did not respond to a request for comment for these episodes, we have been able to gather some information regarding the incident that took place on May 31st, 2017. As Robin said, Armani and his mother were residing in a second-floor apartment at the time and were inside when someone shot at their home. A bullet shattered the living room window. According to Robin, Armani was in the living room at that time. Because he was lying on the couch and watching TV, the bullet sailed through the window over his head. When officers were later dispatched by police, Robin said the bullet was collected in an evidence bag. She said she took a photo of this item on her phone, and she later used the photo in meetings with Dallas police to verify the existence of the evidence and discuss possible forensic testing. At the moment the gun was fired, though, there was no immediate help available, and Armani and his mother had no idea precisely where the shot had come from. But they had a pretty good idea who might have fired it. Moments after the bullet flew into their second-story home, Armani and his mother left their apartment, the space they'd thought would keep them safe, to try and discover what had happened. Outside, they didn't see an immediate threat, but that didn't mean the possible perpetrators were gone. In fact, time would soon prove that they weren't.
Him and his mom, they both went outside together at the same time to ask the bystanders, did you guys see who fired the gunshot through the window? Nobody was willing to point her out.
Robin theorizes that the bystanders who were present that day knew who'd fired the shot, but were unwilling to identify the perpetrator. Whether that was based on loyalty or fear, we can't say for sure. Armani's mother knew that there were security cameras mounted on the building and hoped that the perpetrators had been caught on video. She knew that she'd need something to take to Dallas police if there was hope of pursuing criminal charges. So she headed to the main building at the complex to speak with the management.
Armani's mom went to the leasing office to ask the leasing manager to view the cameras to see if they could see who was actually firing the shot in their home.
Cameras in front of the apartment were not working, so there was no footage of the actual shooting, which would have been vital evidence for law enforcement. The manager and Armani's mother began to walk back toward the scene. They had no idea that another attack had begun while they were searching for possible footage.
While she was in the leasing office is when the female perpetrator and her young daughter violently assaulted Armani right outside his front door.
Robin worried that despite Armani's injuries, there would still be no evidence. After all, the witnesses who'd been present were already hesitant to talk, despite the fact that it was daytime and many people were in the area. But then, she found out that there was a recording, just not one made by the apartment complex. Allegedly, the former neighbor had brought more people with her. They'd ridden in a car and pulled around when Armani was alone. Inside the car was another individual who captured the assault via phone.
And you said someone was filming from a car.
Yes. The angle that the brief cell phone video was filmed from, you can clearly see this person was sitting in their car.
So this was very planned out.
Sounds like it. For them to be aimed and ready to film it.
According to Robin, the alleged perpetrators fled the scene before DPD arrived. Law enforcement noted the broken glass of the window and, as we said, collected the bullet that was still inside. The video taken of Armani's assault was apparently posted to social media soon after the attack occurred. We weren't able to find it on the alleged perpetrator's pages so many years later in any public format, but Armani's family was able to save that footage back in 2017 and quickly submitted it to law enforcement. We've seen that saved recording ourselves, so we can definitely say that it exists. In the recording, you can clearly see Armani struck and you can watch him fall to the ground. After the May 31st attack, Armani still felt safest at home, despite the shooting. He stayed inside for 2 days, avoiding any contact with the outside world. On the evening of June 2nd, 2017, Robin's youngest daughter, Deshae, came to visit, to check in on her aunt and on her cousin, and to see how they were doing. Over the years, she'd sometimes had to talk Armani out of behavior that she felt might be dangerous. But this time, he was worried for his own safety.
So that evening of June the 2nd, did your daughter mention anything else that they talked about?
Well, she didn't have to try to convince him to stay in. Anytime he would get into these tiffs or different disagreements with these people, he would stay home.
Deshae felt better knowing that Armani was going to stay inside, as her mother, Robin, pursued action with DPD regarding the assault and the shooting at the apartment. But suddenly and unexpectedly, on June 3rd, 2017, Armani did decide to leave while his mother was at work, and to this day, no one in the family knows why.
What caused him to venture out away from home on June the 3rd, we don't know, because his mom was at work, my daughter was at work, and we don't know what eventually caused him to venture outside because he had been indoors.
Deshae was the first person to realize that Armani was no longer at home. She called and then stopped by the apartment, but he wasn't there. She didn't want to worry his mother or her own mother, not if there was not a reason to panic. They'd all been through a lot over the past few days. So she decided to look for him herself. Over the years, she'd learned the places that he frequented, and she knew his friends. She was sure that he wouldn't be with the people that he'd been in conflict with, not voluntarily. But Deshae was still worried that someone could have caught up with him. The whole family was aware of the assault that had occurred on May 31st.
She searched for him in places there that she knew him to be, and with the people that he would be comfortable being around or being with, in the event that he had been physically assaulted or had disagreement with anybody. She looked for him, for a while on her own that day. But once she couldn't find him on her own is when she came and let us know.
Deshae hadn't found Armani, but she had gathered some information as she searched the neighborhood. A few locals later said that they'd seen an altercation, this time on the street, near the apartment complex, occurring, and it allegedly involved at least 2 of the people who'd been involved in the EBT to cash conversion deal. The former female neighbor and the male who Robin told us was said to be involved in drug sales. Another woman said that she'd seen Armani that day and given him her phone number, which she'd put in his purse. She also told Armani's cousin that she'd helped him after he'd been assaulted on the street. At this point, the family couldn't find Armani, and they had serious reason to believe that he'd been hurt, so they did the only thing they could do. Robin said that her daughter called 911 to begin a missing persons report. What she said happened next is one of the more perplexing stories a family has shared with us over the years.
So when your daughter first called police on June 3rd, can you describe what she was told?
The 911 operator told her to call NamUs. And when she called NamUs told her she needs to call Dallas police. And they were doing the back and forth thing with her. Nobody wanted to actually do anything to actually report him missing. And that's why Dallas police have a different missing date.
Fall Line listeners should be familiar with NamUs by now. We've talked about the National Missing and Unidentified Persons System many times before. It's an essential database used by law enforcement and medical legal professionals and accessible to the public as well, with front-end and back-end data access that depends on one's role. A missing person can certainly be reported to NamUs, but that missing person must first have a case on file with local law enforcement to be entered into NamUs. To quote NamUs's own guide into entering missing people into the database, quote, all registered users can enter missing persons cases into NamUs. Prior to publication in NamUs, a regional system administrator will verify the missing persons report with the appropriate law enforcement agency and obtain permission from that agency to publish the case information to NamUs. The important piece of information in that quote is that any member of the public can register to do this basic function, but the case will be reviewed by an administrator before it's approved, and that approval hinges on a report being on file with the appropriate local law enforcement agency. That is no fault of NamUs, as they must have a way of verifying facts and of removing cases when a missing person is located. But if a case is not opened with a department, then that process cannot begin. Since we weren't able to speak with DPD regarding this case, we don't know why 911 may have given Robin's daughter this directive, or if this was ever standard in the case of missing adults in their area. But Robin said that without any official investigation open, and with no sign of Armani, the family began their own search on June 3rd, 2017.
We continued to ask around to different people that knew Armani and his mom and our family. That part of it didn't change. And the fact that none of the people that we knew had seen him or heard from him, in the back of our mind, we were already thinking, okay, this can't be good. We were holding out hope against hope that he would eventually be found, and never thought that things would turn out the way that they did. Never thought that.
On July 24th, 2017, on a residential street not far from Armani's apartment complex, a dog was seen carrying what appeared to be a human skull. A Good Samaritan called Dallas police, and eventually scattered human remains and a few personal effects were found in an area off the road. Those personal items included a purse that held a key fob for a Chrysler car, drug paraphernalia, and a phone number written on a piece of paper. That number belonged to the woman who Armani had spoken to on June 3rd, 2017. Robin told us that getting in touch with the family meant backtracking through the 911 system and speaking to the woman whose number had been discovered in the purse at the scene.
And the initial homicide detective actually went to this young lady. Well, he called the phone number that he found in the purse and asked her if she minded if he came and spoke with her. And he did. He went where she was. And she told him, she said that she had given Armani her phone number June the 3rd. It wasn't until the remains were found is when DPD got my daughter's name and phone number from the 911 operator when she called June the 3rd.
Robin said that's when they knew. Though they'd been holding on to hope, they knew. But it was still a shock when a call came in from officials. Her daughter, Deshae, was the one who received the first contact, since her 911 call was the only information on record.
The medical examiner reached out to us, reached out to my youngest daughter, and my youngest daughter was with Armani's mom. And what the medical examiner called for was to ask to bring Armani's mom to the medical examiner's office to adhere to a DNA buccal swab to see if her biological DNA would be a match to the skeletal remains that were found.
At the time, Robin said they'd heard a number of possible rumors. Not only the attack we mentioned, but also stories involving possible intimate partner violence and not a conflict over money at all. The family, they couldn't sort through the local gossip, especially because no one was actually willing to speak to law enforcement. But the stories were terrifying and violent. Some even told them that so few remains were found because Armani had been attacked with a bladed weapon. So when they spoke with the medical examiner, they asked if there was any way to tell how he'd actually died. But at that point, he had not been positively identified. So no answers were forthcoming.
Hearsay from the streets can't be considered as facts, but the one thing that's constant is the fact that the individuals from the community were saying that Armani had been dismembered. So we asked her straight out, the death investigator, the remains that were recovered, can you tell whether or not he was dismembered? And she said, well, the remains that we have, we cannot say for right now that there are any marks or striations. She didn't want to tell us anything until after Armani's mom's DNA had positively matched with the remains that they had found. So that's why she told us she couldn't tell us anything at that moment. When we all walked into the room, myself and my youngest daughter and Armani's mom, they said we just collected skeletal remains, and they asked if she had any dental records for Armani that they could use as well. And she said that she couldn't recall the last time he had been to the dentist. Everything that he was having done was always at this local hospital in Dallas. And so she told us, she said, okay, well, we'll just go ahead and move forward with the buccal swab for us to be able to determine whether or not your biological DNA is going to be a match to the skeletal remains that we do have. She was upfront with us to let us know that it was only 6 skeletal remains at that point. It's a sad situation that we don't hope to see anybody in. So finally, it was October the 16th, 2017. I called that morning, and I would always call as soon as the phone lines would open up at the medical examiner's office. And I asked, well, do you have the results back? She said, well, Ms. Johnson, yes, we do. She said, we got the results back today. And Armani's mom's biological DNA is a match for the skeletal remains that we found. And I just dropped the phone. I was waiting on the news, but to actually hear it is another thing.
Robin said she also had to inform her sister, Armani's mother, of the match. She called as soon as she was finished speaking with the medical examiner.
The phone was just silent, and I held on to it just to see if she was going to say anything, and she never said a word. Just that much hurt and pain. She didn't say anything. And you have to really give her space, because you just never know what mind frame a person is in. And I've never crowded her space. I said, is there anything that I can do? What do you need my help with? And we both cried, and she said, I need your help with everything. And at that point, we just lost it over the phone, and we cried together because it was just nothing else to say at that point. And I told her, I said, okay. And the next day, I got busy. I went to work, reaching out to the Dallas police, letting them know, okay, I'm going to be the person that you're going to be in communication with. And I tell her, and I've said it to countless people, if it were me, I would hope that somebody would do the same thing for me. And not only that, our mom raised us to always stick together no matter what.
We have very little official documentation to help us understand the progression of the investigation into Armani's death. There's a heavily redacted incident report and some information about what was found at the scene, like the contents of his purse. Robin said that Armani didn't drive, much less own a car, so they don't know who the Chrysler key belongs to. Robin's daughter began working with law enforcement with as much information as she could regarding the weeks leading up into Armani's death. And Robin said that Deshay often left work to meet with law enforcement because she was determined to help the investigation in any way that she could.
And they had been calling her in from work so often to where she had to leave. She was working for the tollway authorities, and she lost her job because her supervisor was telling her, you just can't keep leaving. She said, well, I'm the only person that has information about my cousin's death, his murder. She said, and I have to go. She said, I was the one that reported him missing.
Would they ever tell her if they had interviewed other people?
No, they were not giving her any information about what they were doing at all. And that's still going on today. They're not telling me anything about what they're doing.
As we told you in the first episode, Armani's official manner of death was eventually ruled as undetermined. And according to the Dallas Morning News, that ruling was decided because, quote, advanced state of decomposition and the condition of the remains made determining Armani's precise manner and cause of death impossible. In an interview with John Lorden of John Lorden Arts on YouTube, Robin said that the family was told one theory the police were exploring was that Armani might have OD'd and died of drug intoxication. We don't know what the basis was for this theory, besides the presence of drug paraphernalia at the scene. That said, DPD did tell NBC5 in May of this year that, quote, the case has been investigated as a homicide. The family feels that the evidence for foul play in Armani's case is significant. Not only was Armani experiencing intimate partner violence at the hands of one individual in the months before his disappearance and death, he'd been attacked by the associates involved in the SNAP scheme on 3 separate occasions in May and June, with witnesses to the assaults. One of those assaults had even been caught on video. But Robin said the problem has been in getting people to speak to law enforcement and explain what they saw.
I had phone conversation with these 2 females that were giving me very descriptive details about what went on the day that he was assaulted. And I'm asking them, okay, well, why aren't you willing to go and talk to the detective to give him this information? Because it sounds like you were there for you to be describing everything to me. And that's why I say these people were not his friends. These were just associates of his, because if they were friends, they would have gone to the detective a long time ago.
Robin told us that people might be afraid to speak up too, even if they do want to help. Though one potential person of interest has passed away, others are still alive. Many witnesses still live in the same Oak Cliff apartment complex where Armani and his mother resided back in 2017. And Robin understands being scared, but she said that she has not let that stop her from standing up. She said it's a family trait that she and her nephew shared.
Armani was tall and slender, and I'm not tall at all. But when people just assume that they can take advantage of you, then you have to show them that that's not the case. And that has been the case with me from elementary through high school and other life adversities that I've come across in my life. I don't bother anybody, but one thing about me is when you violate my space or you violate me, or I'm seeking answers and you don't want to provide it, then I'll get the answers from somebody. Somebody's going to answer these questions.
Robin's efforts have not been in vain. Her determination and help from advocate Haley Gray and Nicole Schmidt, the mother of Gabby Petito, gained momentum through a successful billboard campaign that garnered local media coverage. That campaign was made possible through donated space offered by Lamar Advertising. And Robin was featured on the local news in 2023 and 2025. What followed was one of the few in-person meetings she's had with Dallas Police Department officials to discuss her nephew's case. This time, Armani's mother was in attendance as well, and their concerns remained the same. They asked for a reclassification of Armani's manner of death, and they hope for real progress in investigation into the assaults that preceded his disappearance. They believe that reclassification is crucial for accessing additional investigative resources, such as funding for forensic testing and public awareness campaigns. They're still waiting for a promised meeting with the Assistant Chief of Police and are determined that higher-level intervention might finally unlock answers that they've been seeking. But that won't come, Robin says, without the reclassification of Armani's case as a homicide. Fighting for answers in Armani's case has not been the only focus for Robin and her family. After the memorial they held for Armani in October of 2017, they've been sure to remind people how his life changed them for the better too. Armani did not always have an easy path to walk, but Robin said he was brave and he was always himself. What they all remember most was the love that he lavished on all of them. That's all he ever wanted, Robin told us. Love.
Armani's legacy in the family, Armani was caring, very caring, and he got that nurturing spirit and nature from my mom. Our mom always wanted us and everybody in the family, she wanted peace in the family, and Armani was the same way. He wanted everybody to be happy and smiling, and the fact that his biological father wasn't a part of his life, Armani wanted love around him at all times. That's his legacy, wanting to see love and peace amongst the family all the time, no matter what. Armani's legacy is just love. He wanted everybody to be loved. That was something that he wanted from his dad, his biological dad, and was never able to get it. And I just, hate that for him, that he never experienced that. His biological father was ashamed of the fact that Armani was gay. And he just never was a part of Armani's life. Which is unfortunate because he missed out. It's just a sad situation, But I'm going to keep fighting. I'm going to keep fighting. And I believe that somebody's eventually going to come forward with the information that we need. I truly believe that. I'm just going to continue to fight. Yes, Lord, I'm going to continue to fight because I want everyone to know how special Armani is to our family. One thing I always tell everybody else, Armani was not a perfect person, but they still didn't give anyone the right to take his life.
Although we have not provided specific details regarding alleged persons of interest, Robin said that the story is well known in East Oak Cliff. Plenty of people know something, and it only takes one of them to come forward and finally provide the answers that will give Armani's mother some peace. It has been 8 years, longer than anyone should have to wait. Armani Morgan's family has launched a rally starter to urge the Dallas Police Department to test critical forensic evidence in his case. With just one click, you can send a pre-written email directly to investigators, asking them to take this essential step. Testing the evidence could lead to Armani's manner of death being changed from undetermined to homicide, a shift that would not only move the investigation forward, but also unlock additional resources and support his grieving family. You can find a link to this rally starter in our show notes and on our social media posts for this episode. If you have any information on the unsolved death of Armani Dante Morgan, please contact the Dallas Police at coldcase@dallaspolice.gov. Next time on The Fall Line, we're working with the family of Rose Goodman, a Philadelphia mother and grandmother who was shot and killed in her own home. Her case remains unsolved. If you know of a case that should be covered on The Fall Line, there's a link to our case submission form in the show notes. Thank you for listening. The Fall Line is an independent podcast, and we appreciate listener support. It allows us to do research, obtain FOIA, pay our content advisors, and support and donate to the causes we care about. Our therapy fund is paid for through Patreon and Apple Premium subscriptions. If you try out the products we advertise, please use our sponsor codes. It really helps. And please, take a moment to rate and review our show in your podcast app of choice. If you listen on Apple Podcasts, please be sure to check your subscription to make sure you're set for automatic downloads so that you don't miss an episode. My book, Lay Them to Rest, is out everywhere now. Find out more through the link in our show notes. The Fall Line is written, hosted, and researched by Laurah Norton, with additional research assistance by Melissa Gold. Interviews by Brooke Hargrove. Engineered and scored by Southern Gothic Media with Maura Curry. Content advisement by Vic Kennedy and Brandy C. Williams. Special thanks to Liz Lipka.